Well, hello to everybody. Here is Teresa Sanderson and my dear friend, Dr. Farah Laurent. And Farah, I'm so excited to have you here today for an episode of the Nurse Entrepreneur Spotlight.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it because it's like the second time that I'm on. So feel like I'm a veteran.
You
So
are,
thank
you are. And this is actually one of those fun times when, because we have that initial interview already done. This is just, we can update people because I think it's always so interesting what happens in the entrepreneurial world.
yeah.
And I'm like you, my journey has been, okay, I'm working my business, but then I might go back to work here, for a little bit. Because it's
Yeah.
always, for me, it's always been no money, no mission, right? And if there's no
Yeah.
money, we can't do all the other. So I have taken those times when I kind of had to put the business on pause, go back to work for a bit, and then come back and all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
what I'd like to start out with, so I know your journey and mine are similar that way, but I would like to start out today with you just maybe introducing yourself, quick overview for our audience. Anybody who doesn't know Dr. Farah yet, I want to give you an opportunity just to get to know her kind of up close and personal. So go ahead and share with the audience a little about you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So I've been a nurse for over 20 years. I know it's hard to believe because I look so young.
You.
But but I started my career in Canada, went into the emergency room, and I always tell the story, because it relates to back to the business. So really, in my last rotation in nursing school, I had an instructor that literally laughed at me, said, "You'll never be an emergency nurse. You should go to med surg." The old kind of traditional narrative that they're still
Mhm.
telling nurses today. So of course I said, who is she to tell me kind of what I can and can't do? So I said, watch me, lady. I will get into the ER. So I got hired as a nursing student, ended up getting two offers, went to the trauma hospital, and that was like the start of the career. And um, I'm so glad that I didn't listen to her and I followed that path and that dream because it's led me to so many great opportunities. And I felt like it really propelled me not only in my nursing career, but it working in the emergency room also made me a better, not only a better nurse, but a better
Mhm.
person. Because as we know, you have to be very resilient, adaptable. So I
Mhm.
gained a lot of skills early on. And then I went into travel nursing, fast forward, moved to New York City, did travel nursing, went into education, and then did some leadership roles up to the director of education
Mhm.
and associate dean, all that great stuff. But there's been some challenges obviously along the way, some adversities, but I always kind of rose above those things and always kind of navigated to make sure that I'm still in my purpose, following my values, that I stay within my values of integrity, always advocating, speaking up for safety and quality. And as we know,
Mhm.
sometimes that's not the easiest thing and people don't like when you kind of stir it up and rock the boat because they want the status quo. So that's not what I'm about. I'm about really shattering these old narratives and being really progressive. So now my focus is to help kind of other nurse entrepreneurs kind of or aspiring nurse entrepreneurs see what the opportunities are out there, and
Yeah.
also to support the new generation of nurses, particularly as they transition to practice and say, hey, you don't have to go the traditional route to even go into the hospital or med surg.
Right.
You could do whatever you want. You could start in any specialty and do whatever. So 3 years ago, launched my business as a nurse career coach.
Mhm.
And it's kind of grown where I'm getting, more clients, and I'm proud to say I've helped over 100 nurses land
Woo!
dream role in that short time. And let me
Yeah.
tell you, I've been also working and while building this business, but now, really focusing my time on the business. So that's kind of a little bit about me. Got my doctorate as well, my DMP. Um,
Love
uh,
it.
and yeah, and I got two little ones, 8 and 4. So you know how that is, mom life and shit.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. Well, I just love the story. And I remember clearly your story of wanting to be the ER nurse and being told, no, you need to be in this box.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's, I just really, I always have just really abhorred those kind of statements where, it's kind
Hmm.
of one size fits all. Every nurse needs to go this path and that kind of thing.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of, it's interesting that there's a lot of different stigma and I think a lot of different competition even among nurses. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, but I know for a long time in my own nursing career, probably for the first 15 years, I felt a little less than as a nurse because I wasn't comfortable working the ER. I wasn't comfortable working ICU, but I
Hmm.
am your ace med surg nurse. I love a good care plan and seeing a patient from point A to point B. What I don't want is a fresh gunshot wound off the street. That's not me, right? That's not my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so in nursing, there's truly a place for everyone,
Right.
and we need everyone. So why not let nurses go where they want to go, where they can bloom and flourish, right?
Right, right. And
Yeah.
and that's what I love doing because um I've helped other nurses as well get into leadership and education positions,
Hmm.
but really I feel like what really fulfills me the most is helping these new graduate nurses because I feel like I'm helping myself when I was kind of younger, right? I'm kind of
Hmm.
doing what I needed when I was back then. And
Yeah.
there are a couple nurse career coaches kind of coming out in these last few years, but you didn't really hear that before, right?
Hmm.
So, it's something that I kind of just saw that there was a little, gap in the market. And I'm like, why not? And if a lot of people were like, oh, that's not going to work. And, there's universities that have resume writers and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but they're not nurses and they're not me, right? It's a little more than just a
There you go.
resume and and a
It's so
cover
much
letter.
more.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
much more. You know, your career is about, just like business is about, what kind of lifestyle do you want? What
Yes.
kind of hours and schedule is going to work for you? How much, what are your values and your priorities? And that's where I think
Yeah.
nursing has really done things very wrong for decades, right?
Hmm.
And I was telling someone yesterday, even the nursing leadership role, I have to say, is like in the clinical setting, that is so hard. And it really sets a nurse leader up to fail because the higher you climb in nursing, if you're in that clinical setting, the
Yeah.
more your accountability for 24/7 availability increases, right?
Hmm.
It's not
Hmm.
like any other industry where, oh, if you rise to the top, you're going to get a golf lunch on Friday, or you're going to, nobody's going to call you after hours ever. It's not like,
Yeah.
it's the absolute opposite
Yeah, it is.
in
It is. It is
nursing
a lot
leadership.
of responsibility. And I
Oh.
think that's probably a whole nother episode too with leadership, but I think there's a big need. I just actually did a podcast on her name is Amy Trueblood, and she works for the A1L, and we talked about the need for support in, building up these new leaders because
Mm.
I always say, for new nurses, obviously orientation, onboarding, all that stuff is extremely important. But then in these leadership roles, we don't really have structured orientations or onboarding.
Mhm.
Some places do have a
Yeah.
couple programs here and there, but there's not really anything long term. And I think that's what contributes to the complexities of like toxic
Mhm.
work environments because we have these leaders. It's a specialty. Leadership is a specialty, and then you have
Indeed.
leaders coming out that are not supported fully, and
Mhm.
then trying to learn the role and manage people.
Right.
And then we know management and leadership are very different. Uh,
Yep.
and not all nurses who excel in the clinical setting should really be leaders, right? Just because you're
Oh,
a nurse doesn't make you a great leader. So,
truth bomb. Truth bomb. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and it's just like, the excellent clinical nurse is not always the best preceptor,
yeah,
for those new grad
yeah,
nurses that are coming in, right? I mean, we have to stop looking at putting any nurse in any role
right.
and really begin looking at putting the right nurse in the right role based on what do they
Hmm.
value most, what are their skill sets,
Yep.
what are their own kind of inherent characteristics and that will allow them to do well. It's really interesting because when I think I study some personality science quite a bit, and for me
Right.
as a blueprint, I'm a high blueprint personality, and that means I'm detailed, organized. I want systems, I want processes, I want, all these things. There are other
Hmm.
nurses who absolutely hate the kind of thing I do. But this is
Right.
why I can write policy. This is why I can, CE is
Yeah.
the thing. I love putting stuff together. But
Yeah.
other people would hate that. But
Hmm.
other nurses love different things. And that's, so we
Right.
need to let them find that niche that isn't somehow, kind of squashing them under the demands of the role, but instead allowing them to flourish.
Right. And I think this is why, even just recently, I think somebody posted on LinkedIn, that nurses, like, you could still apply for jobs that don't have the word nurse in it. Right. And I thought that
Yeah.
was interesting.
Hmm.
And I know that a lot of nurses are moving towards entrepreneurship, and I really love that. I mean, they just had like the health conference. I didn't get to
Yeah.
go, but things like
Hmm.
innovation and a lot
Yeah.
of great things are happening. I just think that obviously in healthcare, particularly in academia, and some organizations just move a lot more slowly. So um,
Hmm.
I think entrepreneurship and obviously business, it's more fast paced and really kind of understanding. So
Hmm.
I think that it is great for nurses who are interested in business because they can start at least a side hustle and start generating some of their own income. And that is so empowering, right? To say,
Yes.
hey, I can kind of take control a little bit here, uh, make an impact and do something that I really want. And it doesn't have to be elaborate, right? Some people think,
Right.
well, like, I have to start this huge business,
Yeah.
solving whatever. But honestly,
Hmm.
sometimes it's just solving the smallest problem and you could still generate, a lot of income, and
Yep.
it doesn't have to be a complex like business model. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I think, healthcare is changing and it's changing right now. And nurses, as entrepreneurs and innovators,
Mm-hmm.
must have a voice in that, and I think we
Yeah.
can close our eyes and act like it's not happening, but people are out there making decisions that are going to affect the future of our profession. And so
Right.
we need to step up right now, in our best voices, not the foot stomping, eye rolling voices, but in our
Yeah.
best voices, so that
Hmm.
we can connect with the people in charge and, with leaders of the country and really, have make our voice heard. I think that's so important. I want to
Hmm.
shift gears just a little bit because you talk about wanting to and actually doing work and supporting new nurses, which I absolutely love. We're very aligned there,
Yeah.
with a
Hmm.
lot of stuff we do.
Yeah.
Um, there's a statistic out there that 33% of new graduate nurses are leaving the profession within
Hmm.
their first 2 years. They're not quitting a job. They're actually saying, take my license. I'm letting go of all the time, energy, money that I put into becoming an RN. I'm letting go of the license. What's your perspective on that, and how can we impact it?
Yeah, I love that because I always share that statistic, especially in their first year, right? So I know that obviously organizations, to try to mitigate that, they try to do these residency programs, right?
Yeah,
Residency programs are great. Not all residency programs are made equal, and not all organizations have them. So that's one
right.
issue. I feel like it needs to be standard across the board that they
Mhm.
must have residency programs to support these new nurses. Whether
Yeah,
you're accredited or not, at least have something in place, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or a year. Research shows residency programs help with retention. It's like a no-brainer, right?
yeah.
And then they need to create also more residency programs, not just targeted to med surg or just a
Mhm.
general residency, but more specific to specialty areas. We know that nurses want to go into ICU right away, go into the
Mhm.
emergency room right away, like
Yeah,
I did, or NICU or whatever.
yeah,
Some places do have that in place, but not all. So why are
right.
we not, especially, it's a call to action, I guess, for everybody in nursing, both
Mhm.
specialty organizations such as like the ENA, the AACN, the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. There needs to be some coordination where we have across the board in the whole United States and Canada included,
Mm-hmm.
residency programs to support
Yeah.
them because people are saying, hey, a lot of clinical instructors are like, hey, go into med surg so you can get your 1 year experience. And you know they don't want to stay there. You're creating a
Right.
revolving door that they just go to med surg, get their 1 year, and then leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Another thing that organizations need to do is allow the opportunity for these new nurses to transition easily within the organization without leaving
Yes.
because they'll say, no, you can't go to ICU right now. You have to stay in med surg for, I don't know, 2 years. Now they're
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I hate it here and I'm
Yeah.
trying to go somewhere else, but I can't. So, they're like, you know what? Screw this because it's like too toxic. I can't deal with this. Like
Right.
mentally, it's like not good for their health. So established residency programs, specialty orientation, I mean, specialty programs are huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't think everybody keeps talking about that there's a nursing shortage. There's not really a
Oh,
nursing shortage.
never has been.
It's a retention crisis,
Yes.
right? Yes, there might be a little bit of a shortage, but I think it's a retention crisis. And also, I feel like so I'm going to coin this, like there's a nurse branding crisis,
Mm-hmm.
meaning the media, a lot of times, and just other nurses have kind of painted nursing as this kind of negative profession because of all the issues, right? I
Mm-hmm.
try to always bring nursing into a positive light,
Mm-hmm.
and this is why I think I'm impacting nursing retention indirectly because I'm helping these nurses get into where they want to be. You know,
Absolutely.
I worked with a nurse, and this was, I mean, I when I went to school in Canada, I went into the ER. My good friend wanted to go into L&D. She
Mm-hmm.
still works as an L&D nurse 20 years later. So
Wow.
when you get these nurses in the right places, they'll stay
Mm-hmm.
longer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the biggest thing to this issue. And then number two, we
Mm-hmm.
need leaders that actually um, want to be leaders and that they're supported because that's the other, like, if you look at a lot of surveys, one of the main reasons that these nurses leave is because of poor leadership or
Exactly. It's
toxic environment.
45%, right?
Yep.
45%. Yeah.
Or the third thing is a lack of professional advancement or development. So, you need
Mm.
to give these nurses these opportunities to advance. And then
Mm-hmm.
don't get me started on diversity in nursing, but that's another issue. You have all these nurses that have advanced degrees, multiple certifications, but they're not getting the same opportunities as some of their counterparts, right? And
Mm.
I'm just gonna say it. There's a lot of racism in nursing. They even came out with that documentary. I
Mm-hmm.
was lucky enough to go actually see the documentary. It's called Everybody's Work, Healing What Hurts Us All, and it talks about structural racism in nursing and in healthcare.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that's another thing.
Yeah, that's a whole other
Um,
thing. It's an
it's
onion. It's like a big
it's
onion to peel.
complex,
Yeah,
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 but
lots of layers.
I think it really starts with the support. And then they
Mm.
think that they're just going to give a new nurse like 4 to 6 weeks and that they're going to thrive. I'm like, they can barely figure out where the clean utility room is in like their
Yes.
first 2 weeks. And now you want to just give them 4 weeks orientation. Like, are you crazy? And then you're expecting them to not only learn the profession, learn all these psychomotor skills, but also
Hmm.
deal with the healthcare team,
Right.
with all the things
With
that
all of the things there. Yeah.
so I think it's possible to improve it.
Ah,
There's a
yeah.
lot of organizations out there that are trying to improve this retention crisis, but I think it just starts with every nurse.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're a nurse watching now that's maybe on a particular unit. When I used to do my preceptor classes, I used to say, well, what's one of the one things that everybody complains about is staffing, right? And we used to do like a role play exercise, and they used to laugh because I'm like, so if a new nurse comes on the unit, you'll hear people like, oh, you can't sit in this chair, you can't do this, like
Oh yeah.
creating these toxic environments early on. The new nurse is like, what is going on here? So I'm like,
Mhm.
you're complaining there's not enough nurses. Now you hire new nurses and then you don't want to be nice to
And you
them.
run them off. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's everywhere, but
Mhm.
you
It's
know,
a lot of places. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So, you can't just say it's leadership's problem or it's this person. Like, we all have to kind of do
Mhm.
some reflection and see how we can contribute to help the retention, because it's so sad,
It
right? You
is.
spend all this money on nursing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get there and then you're like crushed,
Right.
and then
Right.
they just need to realize that there's a lot of opportunities. Like
Mm-hmm.
literally, I worked with a nurse in the ER in New York. She also had a per diem job working at the Bronx Zoo. Like
Oh, wow. Yeah.
there's jobs everywhere
Yeah. Yeah.
for nurses, like
Yeah.
outside the hospital. Yeah. I know it's long, but
Interesting. Yeah, no, 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 no. I love all of that. And the work I do with Nurses Feed Their Young is very aligned with that because this is the big
yeah.
ugly truth that I share is this, in my opinion, is the most epic leadership fail that has ever been allowed to persist is the nurses eat their young culture.
Yeah.
Because back when I became a nurse 34 years ago, I got a few years on you, girl, but all those years ago, we were already talking nursing shortage. Nurses were
Yeah.
already incentivized with double time pay to pick up extra shifts. Okay.
Hmm.
When I was a new grad nurse. So, and here's another thing I say is shame on healthcare organizations that incentivize double time pay, for extra shifts and even mandatory overtime and do those kinds of things.
Oh yeah, no.
Because here's what happens. For nurses who are not financially savvy, that becomes a part of their family budget. And then all of a sudden they can't get out of it, which only leads to exhaustion, burnout, and all the other things.
Right.
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 So it's a solution that's out there that never has worked. It is a big part of the problem.
Yeah.
And it's systemic as well.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So there's like you said, there's so many layers to the problem of what's going on. And I absolutely agree. It's a retention crisis. It's not
Hmm.
a nursing shortage. I don't think it ever has been. Ever since I was a newbie back in the day, we've been saying there are enough nurses to work. They
Right.
just are not willing to work like that anymore.
Yeah. And the other thing is that I'm proud of the next kind of this next generation of nurses, because a lot of them just won't take a lot of this. And they're like, no, I'm not going to do this. And they advocate for themselves, which is great.
Mhm.
The second thing, which I don't want to get into too and veer off and into too much, but academia needs to really improve in the sense of also increasing diversity in their faculty,
Mm,
because a lot of nurses are not being supported the way they're supposed to be supported to be successful to get out of these programs. A lot of these programs are focused on statistics in their data. Like they want to have high pass rates, right? So
yeah.
what happens is they'll accept students that meet criteria, but then they'll let them go for little things and not support them. So you can
Mhm.
have 100% pass rate, but then the retention rate of the program is like 50%. Like that's
Right.
a problem. Like you're letting
Mhm.
go of 50% when you should really be supporting them to success.
Right.
So that's another issue in
Mhm.
academia, or you have leaders in academia. Like I just literally talked to a nurse recently who graduated. She told me that the dean, when she got pregnant, told her maybe you should drop out of nursing.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's the best solution we've got.
But of course she did it and she completed the program, right? But this is what I'm saying.
Oh man.
It starts in school. And then why don't
Yeah.
we have pipelines, right? Like we need better pipelines from high school, to really introduce
Yes.
nursing to high
Hmm.
school students. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of opportunities to do, to increase the workforce and to make it better. But it's gonna take a lot of collaboration and
Yeah.
work,
And it
but
can't be a band-aid. We
yeah,
can't just
yeah,
say, I saw an organization 6, 7 months ago that was offering a $37,000 sign-on bonus for a director of nursing. This was like in Illinois or Indiana or somewhere. And I thought,
yeah,
what do
yeah.
you think the culture's like there? What do you think that person's going to walk into? I mean, you can't fool us anymore, right? You can't
Right, right.
can't make me
But the
think
thing
you're
is,
going to help
instead
me
of
out.
doing that, why don't they just take that and put it on their base salary? Like, let's do that.
Exactly, exactly, because this was going to come in and be gone.
Right, right, right.
We all know it. And heck, I've been given sign-on bonuses and wasn't even able to stay in the environment long
Right.
enough not to have to pay it back,
Yeah, and this is what I do
Yeah.
when I talk to these new clients that I work with, these new nurses, and even other nurses that I work with, but majority the new ones. A lot of them will say, well, I've been looking for a couple months. I think I'm just gonna like settle for this particular place or
Oh,
settle for long term. I'm like, no, don't settle. And then I teach them how to also interview the employer because I'm like, you don't want, especially your first position,
I love that.
to just start anywhere, right?
Mhm.
Because we want to mitigate that issue of them going somewhere and then dropping out of nursing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that is so important. And I love what you said earlier. I just have to piggyback on this about the new generation of nurses, the younger people who are coming out. And I have to say, because a lot of people will say these new nurses, what are they, Gen Y, Gen Z? I can't even keep track of all the stuff anymore, right? But the idea that they're saying, I won't put up with this kind of work environment. For
Hmm.
me, a lot of people, well, a lot of people say they're lazy. They just don't want to work. I say,
Yeah.
no. I say, I applaud them for seeing early on what the face of this looks like. I think that is such a big message. But the other thing that I think really needs a spotlight shown on it is that I don't care what academia is putting out as far as nurses who can pass the NCLEX and do all these things. If they are leaving the workforce, the profession within 2 years, everybody needs to be looking at that.
Right.
Everybody needs to look at that. We will
Right.
never resolve the issue without it.
Right. Because it's not only just producing nurses that can deliver safe care, right? It's also
Right,
teaching them how to navigate in this complex healthcare
yeah,
environment and be able to adapt, right? So,
right.
I'm not gonna get into too much, but like I laugh at some of the curriculum because I'm like, why are we still talking about flow, like Florence? Like, can we just put that down to like a 2 minute talk? Like, why do we need a whole, some of these
Yeah.
curriculums are like we can talk about nursing history, that's great, but let's not spend too much of the curriculum talking about things that are not applicable now,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm, love
So
that.
yeah, it needs to be a little bit updated.
I love that. I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, we could obviously talk for hours. I love your perspective. We are so aligned in so many areas, and this is just wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, and for those of you who are watching, I hope that you have gleaned some wisdom from Dr. Farah today, because this is just an incredible candid sharing that we decided to get together for and kind of update everybody on what she's doing now. But so excited, you're in the career coach space for nurses and being that voice that says, don't settle. And I love the interview your employer. Oh my gosh, yes, it needs to be a good fit for you and for them.
Right, right.
So, with that in mind, Farah, I want to give you the next few minutes just to talk about, share with our audience, how can they connect with you? Where can they find you if they're in need of what you have to offer so that they can connect?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the easiest place honestly is to connect on LinkedIn. That's where I create a lot of content, job search content, interview, those types of things. So you can connect with me there. And then you could check out my website, nursefair.com. For those nurses who are aspiring entrepreneurs that want to start their own business and not quite sure where to start, I also wrote a book called Nurses Making Money Moves, a nurse's guide to starting a business that could be found on the website, nursefair.com. And then I also do some speaking engagements. So I've been doing more of those, speaking about personal branding and nursing, entrepreneurship, you know, so nursing conventions, conferences, virtual speaking. If you need a speaker at your next event, definitely reach out to me. Same thing on LinkedIn would be the easiest. And then you could just Google me, because I write a lot of articles and have different stuff on Google. So if you can't remember, just Google me and you'll you'll find me on Google. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Farah, thank you again for being my guest today on the Nurse Entrepreneur Spotlight. It's always a pleasure to bat around ideas, bounce things off of you. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, and
So
one more thing.
what's that?
The nursing dose. I forgot to mention the
Oh,
podcast.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
Nursing Dose with Fair. You can find it on YouTube for the video version and then on Spotify for the audio. That was the last thing. Yeah. So thank you again
Awesome.
for the opportunity.
Oh my gosh, you are so welcome. You're so welcome. And to everybody who's tuned in today to our audience, I want to thank you for joining us. Remind you to check out Nurse Farah. And if there's something that she can serve you with, please connect with her on LinkedIn. That is always where I see her showing up. So, and concludes our episode for today, and we will see you next time on the Nurse Entrepreneur Spotlight. Bye for now.
Bye.